Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today for today's virtual field trip. My name is Bené Croft. I'm your host, and I'm the field marketing manager for the Graduate Management Admission Council. So welcome to GMAT Prep Camp. And today, our virtual field trip is we're going to walk you through their personal journeys from college to graduate business school. So again, thanks for joining us today. We have Prep Camp. We'll have a few different sessions coming up over the course of the next few days. So if you're interested in any of the other topics, please make sure you register. Also, we always want to get your insights to learn more about the candidates, what's important to you. So if you go to mba.com/surveys, you can fill out our candidate survey of the month, and we'll give you an opportunity to win a $50 exam voucher or a $50 Amazon gift card. So it would be your choice. The drawing would be at the end of the month, and the winner will be notified. So again, thank you for that, and thank you for our students joining us today. We have Max Ma, who attends Levy School of Business at Santa Clara State University, and then we also have Tiffany Liu from the Anderson School of Management at UCLA. So both of our students here are Californians, at least for now. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your stories with all of our viewers. One quick note before we jump into it, we know you're viewing on YouTube, and we want to make sure that you not only hear from the students today, but that you also get any questions answered that you might have. So if you just post a question to the comment section, we're going to chat a bit with the students, learn more about them and their stories, and then towards the end of our session today, we will go through and answer as many of your questions as we can. So again, thank you, Max and Tiffany, for joining us today. Max, if you will start and tell the viewers a bit about who you are, where you're from, and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so I come from China, and I went to Vanderbilt University as an undergrad. But as an undergrad, I studied like human organizational development, which is not like very related to what I'm studying right now. I was interested in education at the beginning, and I did a couple internships in like leadership development, career management, through which I found out like there's really like huge opportunities, and there's a big trend like in data science. Therefore, I decided to switch my focus to data science, and I applied to like Santa Clara University's business analytics program. So that's where I I am today.
Great, thank you. Tiffany, tell us about who you are, how you got to where you are today.
So I'm from Los Angeles originally, and I went to Duke for undergrad. I studied economics there, and I always wanted to work in the entertainment industry, so I moved right back to LA after graduation. I spent a few years working in entertainment, specifically on the creative side in music, and I realized that it wasn't a good long-term fit for my goals and what I wanted out of a career. So did some soul searching, and in the meantime, my family had a small private tutoring business, and so I went there to help them for a few years before realizing that I really wanted to be at a bigger company, and that's what prompted my transition to business school.
Awesome, that's very interesting. Will you give us a little more information about your career before business school? We hear students all the time who sometimes assume that in order to get into a graduate business program, they have to have this background that's, in business. So tell us more about your journey and your careers prior to.
So I definitely have a non-traditional background. So when I worked in entertainment, I started at a talent agency, and I was doing HR there. So I was doing a lot of recruiting and interviewing. And then I had an opportunity to move into a music booking agency, specifically working with electronic dance music artists. So all the DJs, when they go on tour, I'm responsible for booking all their tours, essentially acting as an agent. And working in this type of industry, like entertainment, is interesting because you definitely learn a lot, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily skills that are easily understood by maybe people with business backgrounds. So when looking at programs, I really made sure to prioritize how I could exhibit my transferable skills so that it's presented in a way that business school committees could understand. And the other thing was when I looked at my educational experience, so I worked a lot with tutoring students, creating an SAT test prep curriculum, and which also helped me a lot for when I was studying for the GMAT. But I could go into that a little bit later if we wanted. And looking at a lot of, working with students, kind of like presenting it as a client facing role, I think helped me a lot when I was looking at the application to business school. So I think that no matter what your background is, what's really important is to really extract the skills that you've attained through those positions and then be able to present them in your story in a way that makes sense, in a way that the admissions committee or whoever's reading your application is going to be able to understand and can see you making a good contribution to the school.
Smart. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Max, so your area of interest is data analytics. And
Right.
how did you decide? So you said you're going to go to business school for that specific major or area of interest.
Sorry, I lost connection.
I said, why did you choose data analytics? I know it's kind of the big thing now, and we're hearing a lot about it. What made you decide to choose that as your program?
Right. So, when I was an undergrad, I was like really interested in education and like career management. But what I really found out like through some of my internships that like a lot of these positions really require you to have some technical skills and be able to analyze data and understand data. But I wasn't exposed to that like when I was undergrad, and Vanderbilt didn't even have an undergrad business school. So I think there, and I did some research online, reading some tech news is like saying like how big data is the trend, like how every company is gonna use it like in the future, right? So I just decided to jump a step ahead and like do it as early as possible. This is a really a new area. Like for example, like Santa Clara University just started their business analytics program like last year, and this year a lot of other universities in California also started the program. I know like UC Davis started it, UC Irvine, USC. So we can see like, I mean, it's a demanding trend, and there are like a lot of positions to be filled in this area.
Okay, and so you're in an MS program, not an MBA program, correct?
That's correct.
And so did you go right into your program from being an undergrad, or did you work a few years before entering your program?
I graduated like half a year earlier, so I got a chance to work with some of my professors in research, and after that I jumped straight into this program. But some of my cohorts are from like different background. Like some of them may have worked for like 7-8 years. Some of them like work for 1 or 2 years. A few of them are like me, like who graduated like in 2016, 2015.
Okay, and so Tiffany, you definitely had work experience. We've heard about that going into your MBA program. And we know that often for MBA programs, it is, expected or typical that you have a few years of work experience. What specific skills from your background do you think have been your strongest assets while you've been in your program?
So I think in my previous roles, one of the biggest things that I learned was working with artists. And working with artists, you learn a lot of different types of personalities, and you learn to kind of meet people where they are. And I think that was really crucial for me in success in business school, because I had to work with so many different types of people. And Anderson has a very collaborative culture where we definitely espouse the values of shared success. And so we have a lot of teamwork, a lot of collaboration. And it was really important that I had worked with a lot of different types of people before in my previous roles, so that I knew how to, you know, kind of work well in a team. The other thing that I think was really helpful for me was having been a teacher for so many years prior. So when I taught students and I taught SAT, I was able to then use those teaching skills on myself as a student. So when I came back into school, because I had been out of school for almost 5 years, when I came back into school, I found that it was a little bit easier for me to transition back into the academic environment. Whereas I think a lot of people who had worked, you know, purely corporate jobs for a very long time, they kind of had a little bit more of a difficulty transitioning into like a pure student life. So I think staying in the academic environment definitely helped.
Okay. Max, so when you were applying, how do you feel like your experience helped you stand out as an applicant? Like, how did you stand out from the crowd?
I think GMAT score is definitely one of them. But I think like for other skills, I would say like leadership skills and like the diversity in terms of thinking, because like business school kind of want people from different backgrounds so that they can contribute like, you know, more in class by sharing their point of views and experience. Also, there are a lot of like teamwork, team assignments in business school. I mean, at least for me, I feel like there's more teamwork than in undergrad. So I think like leadership skills, like being able to make the team deliver good project is one of the skills that business school really look at.
Okay, great. That I like what you said there about diversity, just like in thought and approach and everything. We tell candidates all the time not to count themselves out, because you never know what the admissions teams are looking for. So you mentioned you had a great GMAT score. It could be another candidate that maybe your score isn't as high, but it's something about your experience. It was really unique. Perhaps Tiffany's perspective, if she's from the entertainment industry, that probably brought a very different conversation to the table. And so the admissions about that when they're putting these cohorts together. So of course you want to represent yourself as strongly as you can, but don't over stress about it. I think Tiffany even spoke to that, about speaking about yourself and your story in a way that is compelling and showing what value you'll be able to bring and how you'll be able to contribute to the overall conversation. So those are great points there that you both have made. I want to shift a little bit. I know, Tiffany, you brought up the GMAT exam in this conversation. How did you fit studying for the exam into your schedule?
So studying for the exam was definitely something that I prioritized 110%. I knew that that was my main goal. I had a score that I wanted to reach. And so I pretty much just focused every, piece of energy that I had outside of my job on studying for the GMAT. So what that entailed was just every evening, I would just set aside as much time as I possibly could. So usually around 8 or 9 p.m. I'm a night owl, so I work a lot better during the, late evening and even the middle of the night. So kind of like 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. is my best hours. So that worked out really well for me in being able to study during that time. I would also wake up a little bit earlier in the morning to study. And I think trying to balance it with your full-time job, the best tip that I could give is, even before studying for the GMAT, really think about what programs you're targeting and then kind of reverse engineer and figure out what score do you need to get in order to be considered competitive for those particular programs. If you're looking at certain schools and they all have an average GMAT score of about 720, 730, then that's kind of the benchmark that you're going to want to be around, give or take, maybe 10 or 20 points. So I think that understanding where you need to be and having a score target is really important. And that is really what's going to drive a lot of your preparation and kind of, how much do you really need to focus on the GMAT versus on other aspects of the application.
What are your thoughts, Max?
For me, I was a full-time student.
Fitting it into your schedule.
Yeah, so for me, I was a full-time student when I was studying for the GMAT. So like this, the academic environment really helped me a lot because like, I think like some GMAT stuff is, highly related to what you do at school as well. So that probably made the process easier for me. Also, I usually just break down sections into pieces. Therefore, like whenever I have a little bit spare time, I just like pull out the piece of questions that I need to handle and then work on them. I think like being able to like utilize time more efficiently, like especially those like little spare time in between your work or like even your commute from work to home, is very helpful.
Great. No, you guys gave excellent tips. One thing I want to note is that testing early definitely benefits to that. We have statistics that show that the earlier you take the exam, or another way of saying it, the closer to your undergraduate experience, statistically, you would likely perform better. So if you are still in undergrad and you're even considering business school, think about testing as soon as you can. Your score is going to be valid for 5 years, so you have some time to decide how you want to approach it, or if you want to attend graduate business school at all. One of the things that Tiffany said, this exam is all about understanding yourself, understanding how you learn. So she knew that she studies, she's more alert, she's more in her zone at night. So planning study around that is going to be really important. Also, another note there is using the GMAT exam as an opportunity. So many people will look at it like, oh my gosh, I have to take the GMAT exam. Or I know people who've literally delayed applying to a program because they are just so scared of taking the exam. So try to shift your perspective and think about the exam as a tool. If I could get this score, it's likely to take me to where I want to go. So just kind of changing your perspective may change your approach, and hopefully you'll be able to see some positive results from that. So as we're talking GMAT though, what's your best tip, Max? Like if you had one tip to share.
Yeah, I think like spending time spending time working on the very basic things. For me, like, if I had a challenge, some math I don't understand, I would like research the very root of that problem and then like work all the way up to that problem. So like being able to understand like every like components of that big problem is very helpful.
Tiffany?
So I would say by far it's keeping an error log. So this could be a simple spreadsheet that you keep where you list every single question that you've done and worked through, and you mark whether you got it right or wrong. If you got it wrong, was it a careless mistake or was it a conceptual mistake? And even sometimes I know people will time themselves to see how quickly they can work through a question. So if timing is difficult for you, that might be something that you could try. But I found that the error log was extremely helpful in just helping me see at an entire like bird's eye glance just where are most of my mistakes. So for example, I found that most of my mistakes in sentence correction fell in the careless zone. So then I knew, okay, maybe I need to slow down when I do these types of questions, because I never had, issues with time, but I was making a lot of careless mistakes along the way. And same thing with, the quantitative section. If you can see, am I having trouble with, combinatorics, or am I having trouble with probability versus other types of quant questions? I think that is really, really helpful in just being able to analyze where your mistakes are and where you need to focus your time.
Great. No, excellent points there as it relates to error logging, understanding your aptitude or your level of proficiency on like the foundational skills is going to be really key. And you also mentioned or are nodding to pacing and practicing your timing on each different question type and on the different sections. So building all of that into your prep is going to do nothing but help. What advice do you have for other students who are planning to go to business school?
I think like business schools are very expensive. So like you better know what you really want to get out of the school and make decisions carefully. when I was undergrad, I had a totally different like mindset. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I took classes like all over the places. But because business school are expensive, and like if you have a job, it's even more expensive, considering opportunity costs. So make sure like you know what you're interested in and like take those classes that are related.
Tiffany, any thoughts?
So I completely agree with Max, and I also want to add that it's really important that you be really honest with yourself about exactly what you're trying to get out of an MBA program, because that is going to be different for everybody. So, you know, are you trying to mainly build your network, or are you trying to switch careers, switch industries? Are you trying to start your own business? And I think being really, really honest with yourself about what you want is largely going to dictate the type of program that you choose, and hence, you know, how happy you feel with the program and how much success you get out of it. But like Max said, it's a really, really big investment, both financially and in terms of your time. And so it's something that you absolutely do not want to discount on the front end. And you really want to make sure that you do a little bit of soul searching and ensure you are going to school for reasons that are genuine and true to yourself.
Okay. So both of you are rounding out your programs now. What was your biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
For me, I think it was the technical skills. Like as I mentioned, I'm right now like doing business analytics, and there's a lot of data science, like programming involved. Because I didn't have that background, like I had to do like extra work after school to catch up with other students and with the professor.
What was your undergraduate major, Max?
Human development.
Human development. Okay.
Right.
Tiffany, what's been your biggest challenge thus far?
So I never thought of myself as a numbers person. And when I came to business school, I had to adapt very quickly because a lot of the analysis we did was quant-based. And especially because I decided to recruit for investment banking, that was another career in which it's very heavily quant-focused, and you need to be strong with numbers. And I think it was just overcoming that mental hurdle. A lot of my classmates have extremely impressive backgrounds, and it was, you know, kind of like you said earlier, where I felt like I was counting myself out in a lot of ways initially. And I think having to overcome that mentally and just, you know, kind of pick myself up a little bit and say, hey, you know, like I got into this program, I'm just as competitive as everybody else, and I really need to stop discounting my own abilities before I even try.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you the flip of that. I know you're not done yet, but what's been most rewarding about your program so far, or the experience, all of it?
So I would say the most rewarding aspect was landing my job. So like I said, I recruited for investment banking, and that is a career that is very difficult to break into outside of, I think, at the associate level, you know, business schools are kind of like a good feed into that. But if you didn't do it out of undergrad, it's really difficult to break into the industry. And being at Anderson, having the resources that I did, taking the classes, our career center, the network, and the alumni that are out of our program, that really, all of those pieces kind of came together to help me make that transition. And I worked in an internship over the summer, and it was absolutely amazing. I loved it. And it's a big change from what I was doing before. And I think a lot of people hear my story and they're like, whoa, like I never would have thought that you would be doing investment banking. And certainly my hair will not be blue when I start full time. But it was just, I mean, I couldn't have imagined that business school would lead me down this path. When I first applied, I just wanted to work for a larger company. I just wanted to have coworkers. I just wanted to grow my network. And I had no idea that it would lead me down such a life-changing career path. And I really couldn't be happier with that result.
Awesome. What about you, Max? Most rewarding so far?
I think it gives me a new career focus. Before this, I really wanted to be a teacher and work at a school. But because like right now I'm like learning a lot of technical stuff, and the school is located in the Bay Area, like we have the opportunity to visit all these like big companies like Tesla, Google, Cisco, and we have like classmates who are working or who used to work at those companies. So it really sets me into the door in the tech field.
Awesome. What resources did you all use? So you have some people who they may know that one day they might want to do this, but they don't know exactly where to start. What did you use to kind of research the different programs, and what tools did you use?
I think for me, I use like US news. I also like just did research on the programs that interest me on the internet. But the reason I chose this school is from the advice from a mentor. So he worked in the Silicon Valley for like over 20 years. And he told me like this school had a really good reputation in the Silicon Valley. A lot of tech companies, alums are from this university. So that's why I applied.
Great. No, that's great advice, to get a mentor to help steer you along if you don't have someone close to you who has already done the path. Or you can also reach out to schools you might be interested in. They may put you in touch with current students or their alumni to ask questions. LinkedIn, you see people who are in groups of the schools you're interested in. So I know it can be an intimidating process sometimes, especially if you don't know anyone, but really stepping, just a step or two outside of your own network, you might be able to land on someone or something that could help you along, help you make some decisions. What about you, Tiffany? What did you use?
So I knew that location was very important. I spent 4 years in North Carolina, and it was a great experience, but I knew that I wanted to be back in LA long term. So that really narrowed down the number of schools that I had to look at, even as options. But I think for everybody else, the best advice that I can give is really, again, like, utilize your network, because the best way to research a school, in addition to looking at the school's website, attending the panels and presentations, because all the schools will go on the road and I think they sometimes do like MBA tour, or like the schools will hold their own presentations. That's great, but that's only going to give you a surface level understanding of what the school has to offer. I think really, like, speaking to current students is going to give you a much, much, much better idea of what it would be like to actually go to the school. And it also helps you figure out, like, am I a good cultural fit? Because you're going to be there for 2 years at least, and you definitely want to make sure that you're going to vibe with your classmates. I think that's something that's extremely important. A lot of what when I hear really successful alums that are like the CEOs of big companies come and speak at our school, by far the number one thing they mention is how important their network was to them, and that it wasn't until after they graduated from business school that they realized the importance of all the connections that they had made in business school, and how important it was to be able to just pick up the phone and call one of their old classmates and be able to get a deal done. And I think that is something that is really important. So you definitely want to assess cultural fit. And I think the best way to do that is by speaking with current students.
Great nuggets. Thanks so much. We have some questions that have come in from our viewers. So let's go to a few of them and see how we can help here. First question is, how long did you take to prepare for the exam? Max?
It took me about a month, I think. I remember, like, I took my GMAT in April, and I started like studying for it in March.
Okay. What about you, Tiffany?
So I actually took a Manhattan GMAT course. It was offered at Duke, so it was during my senior year. So I think that course was a 4-month class on campus. And I didn't get the score that I wanted the first time that I took it. So that was right after I graduated from undergrad. And I waited about another 3 years before I took the exam again and started prepping for it. And I would say that time of prep was very intensive. I think 3 months was how long I had spent when I really seriously got down to prepping for it. And then I got the score that I wanted. So it took me 2 tries and a couple years in between, but it was what I wanted. I didn't want to apply with the score that I got the first time.
Sure. We have a question related to that. You just mentioned how many times, Max. Did you take the exam more than once?
Yeah, I took it twice actually. I mean, like just like 1 or 2 months in between. I can't remember, but the scores are like quite similar. So
Sure. No, that's good to know. We are doing a session after this, understanding and preparing for the GMAT exam. So if anyone is interested in like specific nuances, definitely join that session. But I can give you a few like data points. On average, if you look at the majority of test takers, they study somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks. That isn't correlated to a certain score. That's just when you aggregate everyone. But it's really going to depend. You know, Max was coming right out of his program. Tiffany had been out for a while. So it really just depends on your needs, where you are, how long it's been since you've been in test taking mode. So it's going to vary, and you'll want to assess all those things when you begin to approach the exam to determine about how long it's really going to take you to get the score, or to get a score that you'd be happy with.
right.
Here's another question. Ideally, what safe time frame should one keep between the GMAT date and application deadlines, especially round one? Any advice there?
I think like for most business schools, the application deadline is probably May 1st, right? And it takes
One's like October, I think. Early
right,
October.
that's probably May 1st is the last round, I think.
Yeah. I'd say it varies. A safe amount of time is at least a few weeks usually. I'd say a month if you could. I know sometimes the deadlines are approaching quickly, or you're making a last minute decision. But with the GMAT exam scores, there is about a 10-day period, a 21-day period actually, between when you sit for the exam and when you should expect an official score report. They usually come earlier, but we say you want to give it up to 21 days. So that's, a 3-week time frame there between when you sit for the test and when you can expect your score. So you'd want to probably build out even a few more weeks, or perhaps even a month, if you need to take the exam again. So we don't necessarily advise. People do it all the time. They'll take the exam and they may just take it again, 2 weeks later. But if it really is a content issue, or you need to shore up on specific information, you want to make sure you have the time to study and prepare for that next time when you take the exam again. Here's a question. Many people advise for me to go for professional certificates instead of an MBA. Can you tell me what is better and why an MBA gives high opportunities? So you all probably, that's going to be a personal decision, but if you could provide some insight as to why you chose an MBA, Tiffany, and maybe why you chose your MS program, Max, maybe that would help.
So I think a professional certificate is, if you are very certain where your career path is going and you know that you need that certificate to get to the next level, that would be a great choice for you. It's certainly going to be less expensive than a full-time MBA program or even part-time program. But I think what the MBA has to offer is, again, I spoke to the network of people that you meet during your program. And during these 2 short years, you do form very deep relationships with people. And being constantly surrounded by people who are extremely bright and driven, motivated, and also just really fun to be around. I think you can't discount that either. And the second thing is, again, speaking to my personal story, it's like you'd asked me, 2 years ago before I started my program, could I imagine that I would be doing investment banking? I would say, absolutely not, you are crazy. And I think it's being in the business school environment with the resources that we had that really allowed me to carve out that path. And so if you're even at all open, and if you have, any chance that you're like, well, maybe I might want to do this, or I might want to look into that, I would say an MBA is definitely a better choice because it just gives you a lot more optionality.
Yeah, I agree with Tiffany. It heavily depends on your needs, I think. Like for me, like coming with no work experience, I think it might not be the best choice for me to like invest 2 2 years and money like into an MBA program, but an MS program is just 1 year, and it really focuses on the skills that you want to gain. I consider the MS program as a skill enhancer. I noticed like through my conversation with my fellow MBA students at Santa Clara University, some of them come from a technical background. Like some of them are currently working at like Cisco, Google, Apple, and they are engineers, and they want to change their careers into like product management or like manager positions. So they come to MBA students to like develop business skills. So definitely different needs decide where you're gonna go.
Yep, I would agree with everything said there. Let your end goal kind of determine which track you take. Here's a question about, is it better to, as an undergraduate, is it better to go and get some work experience or go directly into an MBA program? Any thoughts there, Tiffany?
So I think Max made a really good point earlier when he said that, he was coming directly from an undergraduate program, and so he thought that, maybe an MBA wouldn't necessarily be the best way to go for him. And like I said, everything depends on kind of your background and your situation. But I would say by far and large, yes, you do want work experience, because that's really what's going to allow you to contribute to the MBA program, and also to be on an equal footing with your classmates, because most everybody else is going to be coming out with a couple years of work experience. Certain programs have a shorter versus longer time frame in terms of how many years people have worked in general. So that might also be something that you look into when you're trying to select the school that you want to go to. But I am a big proponent of working for a few years before you go and get your MBA.
Yeah, I chime in there and say that to Tiffany's point, some schools may, you'll see their average work experience is less, some may be more. If you can, try and base the decision again on your future goals. And if there is a program or two that you feel like would be best fit for where you're trying to go, take a look at what their requirements are, maybe as opposed to saying, I'm not going to work, so let me see which programs fit that. So try and back into it based on where you're trying to get, and see, where that leads you. I have a question here. If I can use the GMAT score for 5 years, could I use the same score more than once if I don't get into business school in my first attempt and try it in the next year, and so on? Absolutely. So when we accept your GMAT score, that score is going to be valid for 5 years. You can choose to send that score or apply to as many schools as you choose using that score. So that will be totally up to you. As long as the score is valid, you can use it to apply to multiple programs. So there's a specific question. There are two specific questions that I would direct more towards Tiffany. One, there's a person interested in obtaining an MBA to pursue a career in film or television management. Any conversation there, of could someone get an MBA because their goal is to get into the field?
Yes, so it depends on what you would like to do within entertainment. If you want to be on the creative side, if you want to be in production and you want to be on set, you want to be working with talent, I would say it's probably not going to be the best choice for you to do an MBA, just because it's not going to be valued by that part of the industry. That part of the industry, if you want to get into the creative side, it's just experience. So they don't care if you have a Harvard law degree, if you have a Stanford Business School degree, they do not care. They want to know, who have you worked for how long, and do you even understand the industry? Who do you know? Those are going to be really important pieces. If, however, you want to work more on the corporate side, let's say you want to work at a studio, or you want to work within marketing at one of the big studios, then yes, an MBA would be really great in helping you to make that transition. A lot of my classmates at UCLA are on that exact path. You know, they came to UCLA because we have a very strong network in entertainment. A lot of our alums work at a lot of the big companies out here and a lot of the big studios, and that is definitely a career path that they are pursuing. But it really depends on, you know, what exactly you want to do within film and TV. There are a lot of different options if you choose to go the corporate route. Some of it might be a little bit less sexy, like, you know, you might be doing financial projections and budgeting. So is that something that is okay, or do you want to be working with the creative executives and, you know, making script decisions and developing a movie and that sort? So I think knowing what you want to do in entertainment is going to determine whether an MBA is going to be the best path to take you there.
Thank you. Evandro says that you inspire him, Tiffany, so we wanted you to know that. Who currently works in finance and would like to apply for an MS in finance. An MBA is a high investment, you know, as far as he's concerned. Do you feel that you're having the financial return that you expected? I know that you haven't finished your program yet, but even if you could speak to how you believe it'll turn out.
Yeah, so I mean, I took out loans, massive amount of loans to be able to do my program. I basically maxed out the loan amount that I could have. So yes, very big financial investment. But in terms of where it's taken me in my career, like, again, I broke into investment banking, which is a really difficult career to try to get into if you don't have the previous background. So let's not even count like the salary, but in terms of the skills that I'm going to learn while I'm on the job, and it's something that I know is going to be really helpful for me no matter what I decide to do later on. So yes, 100% the financial return is definitely worth it for me, even with my crazy loans that are outstanding. But again, it will depend on you and your situation. If you're currently working in finance and you want to do a master's program in finance, I would say, think about what that program is going to allow you to do. Is it something where you need the certificate or you need the degree in order to get promoted to a different position, in which case then it would be easy to kind of calculate what exactly your returns would be. But if that's not the case, then I think you want to think really long and hard about like whether that degree is really necessary if you're already in the field.
What are your thoughts there on return? Again, Max, I know you haven't finished your program, but you can speak from the perspective of getting an MS degree, and if you believe that your financial return is going to be worth it or as expected.
Okay, first of all, I got some partial scholarship from school, so my financial burden isn't as heavy, but I think like for me, if I didn't take this program, I would probably be doing like HR or teaching job. Just in terms of salary, the pay is definitely not as high as a tech job in the Silicon Valley. I think like for a data analyst, the average salary here is around like 1,100. Sorry, not 1,100. 100K a year. So in terms of salary, it's definitely like a better investment in a business school here. Also, I think it depends on what programs you're going to do and how long expect the return to be. If you're doing like a MS accounting program, the return is probably not as high as like MS finance or MS BA in terms of salary.
Great info, great advice. We have a question about MBA programs or executive MBA programs versus a full-time MBA for a career switcher. And I'll just chime in here. I would say the major distinction between these two programs is really going to be where you're starting from. Most executive MBA programs, they have a much larger requirement as it relates to years of experience. So if you have, let's say, 10 years experience and you can get into an executive MBA program, It may be more fast-paced. It might be a bit shorter. But it would likely still be able to offer you some of the same experiences you would get in a full-time MBA program. Now, the cohort may be smaller versus your full-time MBA program. So these are going to be the things that you want to consider. So, of course, that the coursework that you are involved in is going to give you or create a foundation for you to switch your career. But then there's also the network that you build. So there are a few different aspects that you'll be using as it relates to this program to take on and move into your next endeavor. So those are going to be the types of considerations you're going to want to make one program versus the other, you know, what you'll be able to gain within the classroom and also through your cohorts in one program or the other. Any additional thoughts there?
No, I think you captured it perfectly in that I think for at least at UCLA Anderson, the MBAs are people who have worked, 8, 10, maybe even more years in their industries, and they really feel like they want to come and get their MBA because for whatever reason they just really need that degree. They want to take classes with some of the professors here that are experts in their field if they want to learn more about something. But I think the full-time program is much more geared to, again, building that network and developing those relationships. And I think sometimes that could be even more important for a career switcher. The other thing is that if you're switching careers, it's really nice to be around a lot of other people who are also switching careers. And our Career Center kind of jokes that in business school, everybody just wants to trade jobs with one another. Everybody wants to do what other people did before. So I think that you can't, you really want to consider like being in an environment where everyone's kind of working towards the same goal. That can be very, very empowering if you are trying to do something completely different from what you did before.
Awesome. We have a few GMAT specific questions. There's one question, what a 2-year gap after graduation, will it have an effect on your GMAT score? Again, it's going to all depend. It's going to be a very individualized outcome there. But I will say the data says closer to your undergraduate experience, you'll likely perform better on the exam. I wish I could, if I had a chart that I could show you, but basically it'll show how the first, I think it's 2 years after your program, it shows that the chart goes up in terms of likelihood of it, the score band. And then once you get like past 2, you see it like drop off. And then as it gets maybe 5 to 7 years out, it starts to go back up. And I don't know, we can make inferences as to why that is. Perhaps the first few years, you're still kind of in testing mode. You're closer to the content. A few years out, you've become really engulfed into your work and getting that done and balancing your life. So you're probably a lot more disconnected, younger, you have a few more things to manage. And then as that time probably moves on, you get people who get a lot more serious about their next step and they're a lot more focused and understand where they're looking to go and probably take studying a bit more seriously. So only thing I can say there is data is data. You have people who go all over the charts as that relates, but just keep those things in mind. If your plan is to take a few years off, just continue to think about the fact I might be getting disconnected from the information. Do I want to do it now while I'm kind of already there, or do I want to wait and then I'm going to make sure that I'm going to put in the work necessary to build myself back up if that ends up becoming necessary? How many times is too many times to take the GMAT? You want to ask your schools, but I'm going to say there aren't too many times. You can take it up to 5 times within a calendar year, and there's an 8-time testing limit for just life. You can only take it 8 times. But within a calendar, you can take it up to 5 times. On average, people take it 1.8 is like the average. So the majority of people might take it twice. With that being said, though, we had a representative, she's the dean over at Columbia on, and she gave an example of a person who was interested in the program and took the exam 7 times. And like on that last time when that person was able to get 20 points higher, her and her colleagues cheered because they like the person so much. So it really can just depend. There is the option of canceling your scores if you take it, if you are concerned about the admissions officer seeing all of those scores. You can choose which scores you want to report, but just keep in mind that you can only take it 5 times within a calendar year. You can report as many scores as you want. You can report every score. You can report none of the scores. So we really give you a lot of choice in terms of how you present yourself to the admissions teams. All right. We have a few more questions. Wait, one more. Without work experience, did your GMAT score help in the admissions for an MBA in healthcare management? Very specific question. You're going to have to ask the specific programs, because they all vary in terms of what their requirements are, how they view that information. They'll probably have a standard response to that on the website, but you definitely want to reach out, if you have the opportunity to connect with them on the road, if they're visiting a tour or something like that, to gain some more insights, perhaps even build relationships with the admissions officers at the programs you're interested in, and start asking them some of those questions, and they may help to advise you on which way you might want to go. And then there is a general question about the admissions process. Like, what is that like? If either of you want to provide any insights on the admissions process and what it entails.
So I actually work on a student organization called the Admissions Ambassador Corps, and we are, for UCLA Anderson, our interviews are all conducted by second-year MBA students. So we kind of manage that whole process and kind of train the interviewers, and so that gives me a kind of first-hand look into the admissions process. And so for UCLA, we really emphasize evaluating the application holistically. So that means that every single piece of the application is a data point that is going to support your story. And that means that just because you have a super high GMAT score, let's say you have a 790, that doesn't necessarily mean that you definitely will get in. It's definitely going to make a compelling case for your test taking abilities, and they will be sure that you'd probably be able to handle the academics. But they also want to look at the other aspects of your application. So I think if you are targeting the score as the bulk of your application, I think again, like looking at the school that you're applying to, like what do they value, because every school looks for sort of different things. And if you're not sure, I would highly recommend that you just email the admissions team. I know that when I was applying to schools, I never wanted to email the admissions team because I was afraid that, if I asked a stupid question, that they would write it down in their folder, and then they don't do that. And nobody does that. And in fact, a lot of times the people who answer questions are different from the folks that are evaluating your application. So I can say for sure, at least for Anderson, that you should definitely feel free to reach out to the admissions committee and ask them any questions that you may have. They'll really be able to give you, specific to your case, kind of like what they would do if they were you, or as it applies to admission to UCLA.
Right. Max, what about from your experience? What were the various components of the process? Did you have to provide an essay or recommendations? Did you do an application?
I think like in the application process, I had to submit like 3 recommendation letters. I had to write an essay. Also, after their first round, they had like interview with me. But in terms of GMAT score, I would say like, even though it doesn't tell like all the story, the higher the better. Especially if the school has some like scholarship, like a higher score probably can, ensure some scholarship.
Great. Thank you both. I think we're done with our questions, but you all have been excellent panelists. I'd love to have you back. You shared some great insights about the process overall. I'd like to end with that note that Tiffany gave about it being a holistic process. We've talked a lot about like the GMAT exam or making those decisions, and it's really about the full picture that you paint. They're going to evaluate this holistically. Of course, that great GMAT score is going to help. It can open some additional doors for you, but just make sure you're considering that, you're thinking about that as you're thinking about your next step. What's the story that you're looking to tell? Who are you, and how can you show all you've contributed in the past, and how that information or that experience that you gained is going to help. The fit is going to be really great. So you want to make sure you're expressing that. And let's say you apply for 2 different programs, you'll likely have some distinctions between those applications, because it really is going to be about each school's culture and how you marry into that. And that may change one program to the next. So we wish you all the best of luck. I had some great conversations around finance and data analytics. And again, stay tuned for additional programming throughout the rest of the week. But have a great rest of your afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us today. Tiffany and Max, thanks again.
Thank you.